Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, I do have this really cool image we use when we do movie reviews for Upstream. So I'm just going to use it because why not? Boom. Michael Gallagher had too much fun making that, so I use it. Guys got skills. What can I say? All right. So the next of the introduction, dear listener, is I'm going to let the guests introduce themselves to you. So Declan, we'll start with you and go round robin. Can you tell us who you are?
I'm Declan Finn, the man, the myth, the jacket, mostly the jacket. I've written about, I think I'm coming close to 40 books by now. I will write in pretty much any genre that's not nailed down, some of what that is. I bring a crowbar. And, I'm currently working on, urban fantasy or vampire romance, depending on how many explosions you can fit into either genre. If you go by Harry Dresden, I'm urban fantasy. Currently working with Blaine Pardo on a book in his Land and Sea series.
Oh, nice.
So I get around.
So the funny thing is I never bought into when people said they wear the stuff to cons just because it helps them stand out. And I met you in 2016 at RavenCon, and some lady came up and was talking to you. She walked away. You had taken your coat off because we were done, and we were just all walking out of the convention hall area. And she walked back and asked if you had seen yourself because she was looking for you and didn't recognize you without the coat on. And I was like, well, holy crap, there's something to this. That still tickles me. I laugh still.
Oh, yeah. I've had people who have shown up to my wedding. They walked past me in a hotel lobby 2 or 3 times. They did 3 rotations right past me, and I'm waving at them. And they look right past me. Then it's like, I walk up to them I'm point blank range. It's like, hi. It's like, oh, I didn't see you there without your jacket.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. I used to walk with a cane, and when I stopped because I had the knee replaced, people would not recognize me, even though I was standing in a booth in the same suit with the same name tag on.
Was it at least a pimp cane?
Pardon?
Was it at least a cool pimp cane?
No, it was, it had a sword in it, some.
Oh, that's cool.
Ebony and silver handle, something to make on a cold winter night when you've got nothing else to do.
When I first got hurt and they transitioned me from Walter Reed to the Hampton Hospital and then from there at home, and they gave me the cane to help me walk when I first got hurt. There was a guy that was at the front of the VA. He was like basically a version of a Walmart greeter, was a Tuskegee Airman. He was in the second class to go through, and he stopped me on my way out and he said, son, if you got to have a cane, you need a pimp cane. And he had this one that was like polished oak with like a golden handle, and it was so cool. And I actually ended up getting to talk to him some. He was the second class. He said you could see him running, carrying the guidon in the movie Red Tails, or one of the other ones where they show the class coming behind them because they always focus on the first ones. He said, I was in there somewhere. So when that man passed away, it was standing room only, and they had to get a bigger venue. So that's a life well lived. All right, Chris, introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? Chris Denote, short story writer primarily. Done some stuff for Bain, Raconteur, and a few other publishers, some indie. I do reviews for Upstream as well, books, music, and movies. And I'm looking to really substantially increase my output for the remainder of 24 and going into 25 and get into some novel writing finally.
Outstanding. All right. And Mr. Denton Sal, you haven't been on the show for a while, but welcome back.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be back. I've seen at least one of the renegades here more frequently because we have dinner together occasionally. I write mostly fantasy, though I really will pretty much try any genre except for science fiction. I am by training a physical scientist. Science fiction makes me sob uncontrollably into my beer or bourbon. And actually, usually with science fiction, we're into Shine already. I'm retired now. I'm helping my sons with their company, and so I spend most of my time either writing or making things. I just got done doing a bookcase As I said before, I built a sword cane. I built a couple of firearms. I'll pretty much try building anything that I can manipulate the materials in. And that's it. And I don't review, but I do get my books from Upstream Review. I do usually use them as a guide, and I've gotten a couple of ones I would have never looked at that hadn't been put up there. Not Doug Lyons. His I kind of found first. We found each other years ago, and that's another long and probably illegal story.
Okay, so I'm taking it you are not a fan of Handwavium University.
Not really. The problem with science fiction is people do stuff like transparent aluminum or faster than light travel or, just kind of, please don't make the pandas cry.
Well, isn't that your job now?
No, that was a talk I gave. Don't make pandas cry. I mean, it was, it's like poisoning people. You know how hard it is to deceive a GCM SMS. It's kind of, if they suspect you, they got you.
Okay. So you don't buy into those that use like the Alcubierre drive, which supposedly is the math checks out. I have not checked the math myself, obviously.
No.
Okay.
It's not I don't buy it. I know it doesn't. It doesn't work.
Have you looked at any of the revisions that future or follow-on physicists have made to the math to fix whatever errors they saw?
Not really. I'm not really a physicist. I tend to look at things like some of the odder forms of physics, and astrophysics is more religion than actual science. I mean, you can't test it. Or you test it and it doesn't work. I mean, i.e. aliens. We've been broadcasting things. Now, of course, we also ship out ships with naked people on them, which, images, porn image, basically. Yeah, it's like, yeah, maybe I wouldn't contact them either. But, it's like, well, there has to be alien life. Why? We've never seen any evidence of it. Would it be cool? Yeah, I'd love to. There's all sorts of questions I have. But, is it conceivable? Yeah. But is there evidence? No. So at some point it comes down to evidence, or you're dealing with faith. And I already have a religion. Thank you.
I think you're right to it, except I think if we ever get a message back, it's going to say we stop sending your nudes.
Yeah.
But that's actually one solution to the Fermi paradox that I don't think anyone's tackled is they didn't like the media we sent them in, so they avoid us.
That's kind of like the reverse Galaxy Quest then. Took one look at it and went, ooh, no, change.
Probably.
Hey, if I watched 20 years of Grey's Anatomy, I wouldn't want to contact us either.
I don't think I've ever watched one episode, so
Don't. Just don't.
A lot of the stuff that came out like that, where everyone was hooked on those, I was busy chasing girls and sports and having a life outside of a TV. So, all right. So before we get too deep into this interview, first we got to start with the religion questions. Are you gentlemen ready for this?
Sure.
All right, Declan, we're going to ask you first. Stargate, Battlefield Earth, or Planet of the Apes?
Oh, definitely Stargate, but the TV show, I tried getting through the movie twice. I did it once early, somewhere in the mid-90s, tried it more recently, failed. TV show, fun. I actually picked up on that in the last 6 to 8 months. And wow, it's good. It's smart. It's almost like, gee, this is kind of like what Star Trek used to be, only with good writing.
Okay. What about you, Chris?
Let's see. I'm actually probably going to go with Planet of the Apes, at least the first movie with Charlton Heston back in the day, just because I saw it first, and I saw it a bunch growing up. And of course, there's the ending. It still gets people to this day, which is, it's always neat. It's always a neat image, right? Stargate I like. I mean, I'll tell you, it's funny. I actually got to spend some time in the mountain, in Cheyenne Mountain, during my career, and I found Stargate Command. It's one of the men's room on like the 3rd floor.
Did they put the sign for fun?
Yeah, they did. They put a big patch up. It said Stargate Command on the men's room door.
That is awesome. Were you allowed to take a picture of that?
No.
I don't know. Classified area, so I wasn't sure.
No, but
Okay.
I will tell you what it actually looks like in there, just broadly. The Navy built it. So basically, you're walking around inside a battleship that's inside of a mountain.
I mean,
Yeah,
sounds cool to me.
it's a ship in a mountain. No kidding.
Oh, okay. So now we can have like this the hidden spaceship in there, and we could like pretend the mountain falls apart, and we've got our battleship Yamamoto or something. You got a plot right there.
Ooh, neat reference. Dig it.
All right, Denton, Stargate, Battlefield Earth, or Planet of the Apes?
I have no clue on what any of these are. I haven't owned a TV set since Dukakis ran for president, and I don't think I've seen a movie since the boys were into Muppets.
Okay. Well, at least
I am the weirdo in the room.
At least with Planet of the Apes, it's topical at the moment because with everything going on with the Boeing stuff, and they're the joke is when the astronauts come back, have everybody wear the ape masks and mess with them.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I probably saw that, but for the life of me, I don't know whether I've seen that closing scene on YouTube or actually in the movie when I was a kid, but I don't remember the movie at all. I mean, women in scanty clothes and ape-looking people. It's kind of okay, whatever. I'm just not. It's not. I don't like entertainment. It's just I'd rather go to a musical or a play than a movie or a TV set.
Okay. All right. And next, because we're polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, The Crow, Lost Boys, or Blade. Declan, I know you've got opinions.
I have so many opinions. Let's be polite. Let's go for Blade because it is the least obnoxious. I have no problem. I had no problem with the conclusion of The Lost Boys. I thought Bernard Hughes stole that movie with about one line. I don't know why he wanted to steal it. It was petty larceny. My problem is Joel Schumacher. It's like, dude, I know you swing for the other team, but could you tone it down just a little? And, oh yeah, could you stop making the movie a music video? It's a film. It's like, oh, we're going to be moody and atmospheric and have music. And thank you. I saw MTV way back in the day when it actually had music videos on it. I don't need it anymore. Thank you very much. Let's move on with a plot, shall we? It was nice to see a young Jack Bauer, although it was kind of weird. It's like, wait, how old is he supposed to be here? It's like, oh yeah, he's actually a teenager here. What? He still looks like Jack Bauer. And that was 10 years later. Or 15 or something like that. But yeah, I'll go with Blade, even though, good God, Wesley Snipes can't act his way out of a paper bag.
All right, what about you, Denote? The Crow, Lost Boys, or Blade?
I think all three of them got something recommended them. I mean, with The Crow, it's the soundtrack. I mean, that was the soundtrack to the alternative soundtrack to high school, not all, outside of the MTV stuff. Hey, Brandon Lee's cool. That's all I could, so there were things about it I dug. Lost Boys, oh, come on. There's two good lines in that. There's the end line, which does steal the movie, and then there's Death by Stereo. I mean, that was awesome. Speaking of, though, I mean, you're right. It is a long music video. It is 100%. And it's even got a young Bill, Alex Winters, and he's Bill, right? Or is he Ted? Which one is he? Anyway, you know what I mean. But yeah. Blade. All right, let's face it. Blade's known for one thing, and it's that opening club scene.
Yes.
I mean, that was pretty badass. I mean, they did a killer job of that. I mean, the rest of the movie, but they nailed that. I mean, that was the moment. It was like, wow, this is a Marvel movie that doesn't suck. No pun intended. But I mean, this is when we had Captain America with the rubber ears on the helmet. If you remember that, we had that when we had Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher. So Marvel wasn't too hot for movies yet. They had that Roger Corman Fantastic Four, if you've ever seen pieces of that. So that Marvel was trying to get away from that at that point. So Blade was like the holy crap, we did it, for them. So, I think all three of them got at least like one good thing, in them. That's just me.
I saw the comic book about the Crow. Does that count?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're rolling snake eyes here again. I've got nothing.
Where possible, we pick IPs that are more than one medium. So yes, it's totally acceptable to say the comic or graphic novel.
Mm-hmm. And it's pretty old now too. No offense, it is. It's just it's a late '80s comic, black and white indie comic superstar from back in the day.
See, I didn't even know there was a comic. I just remember the cool fight scenes and the angsty goth vibe that it had going on for it. And it was a moment in time for, when that was popular. So I
don't see the remake unless you're masochistic.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the remake. And of course, there's the lore in the back end of people getting hurt on the filming of The Crow.
Wait, there was more than one?
Well, I'm trying to speak in broad terms because I don't know what's going to get us banned on YouTube.
This is true.
But yeah, it's that was as much as part of the story as the story itself in the intervening years. The stage mishaps. So okay. All right. Now the most important question we stop asking ourselves when we grow up, but what is your favorite dinosaur? Denton, you've got to have a favorite dinosaur.
Well, it's not technically a dinosaur, but the winged bird creature, the intermediate Archenopsis, is my favorite. I did a master's thesis on that little beastie.
Okay. All right. What about you, Denote?
Triceratops. They look cool.
I mean, it's a good reason. Rule of cool for the win. And Declan.
I'll take the Velociraptor for 500, Alex. But preferably the Michael Crichton version, not the, accurate one that's like the size of a chicken and, with feathers on it.
That's one angry chicken, though, man.
I tell you, if you've ever run into some roosters that have been bred for fighting, you can see where that they bred through.
Yeah, it's I don't know, the rule of cool. It's still getting my head around the idea that they all had feathers, which is now the new thought process. So, because obviously you hear the images you had as a kid when that was what you were looking at, it was all lizard-like. So it's kind of disheartening. The cool thing though is they've been doing studies and they have people whose whole specialty, they're vocal experts, and they take the bones. If we've got enough of they can recreate the sound they think it might have made. Now there's a lot of guesswork in that, obviously, but some of it's kind of cool in a creepy sort of way, like what they think a T-Rex might have sounded like from reconstruction of the various parts that they had.
I've always kind of imagined an overly large, overly angry rooster.
Okay. I can see that. Yeah. We'll take that one. I'll buy that one for $1. All right. And last, but certainly not least, because we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes, we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it? Declan?
Tea.
Iced. Iced. Gotcha. All right. What about you, Denote?
Coffee, a little bit of cream, no sugar.
Okay. A little bit of civilized human being in there somewhere. I can appreciate that. And what about you, Den?
Coffee, black, bitter.
Like your soul. I like it.
Yes, exactly. But usually when I say that, people throw an ice cube in it.
I would never do that. It's just not nice.
I don't know. I mean, good coffee. I mean, I can appreciate it with cream, particularly when you're on a road trip and it's, road stop coffee. But man, I mean, really good coffee, like some of the Ethiopians or some of the Sumatrans. I mean, putting anything in it is a sin.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I like a good flavor creamer to go with it. But, I'm essentially drinking a Big Mac with liquid form with the calories of what I like. So I have to limit myself.
I love it. Turkish coffee will keep you up for 48 hours straight. I mean,
I don't think I've ever had Turkish coffee. I wonder if you can get that in the States done right.
Oh, you can. They're Turkish restaurants. We had a Turkish nanny for the kids for a little while. Not really a nanny. She didn't really live in, and I didn't impregnate her like our current VP candidate for the Democrats. Or was that? No, it's the VP's husband. I get confused. She actually used to taught me how to make it, and my word, the amount of coffee you put in that little pot is just phenomenal. I mean, it was just like 50% solids by volume. Yeah.
When I was in grad school at Nova, one of my coworkers, because I worked as a barista on campus, was Cuban, and so she took me. She was working there while her husband was going to school to be a doctor. So we went over to have dinner with her and her husband, and they made Cuban coffee. And I'm like, you could hear the colors and see the sound. It was that much, but it was so good. It was also probably horrible for you because it was so sweet, but I loved it every second of it.
Have you ever seen, I think it's Julio Iglesias. No, it's not his name. He goes by the nickname of Fluffy. He's a comedian.
Okay.
Got a whole skit on Cuban coffee and being in Miami and getting the little cup and telling him he wanted a real cup and getting a regular coffee cup. And he realized he had messed up. He looks up and the entire kitchen crew is peeking out the door watching him drink.
I know the guy you're talking about, yeah.
Oh, I've seen him too. That's right up there with the if you've ever tried European sipping chocolate, which is like hot chocolate, but it's richer and creamy. I couldn't do past the sip. I had to like pass it on. It was just too sweet. And I saw a guy try to chug the whole thing, but he must have had the diabetes power because he was able to chug that, and I couldn't.
If he didn't have it before, he had it after.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I'm with you. I will take it in the smaller cup when I try it next time. So, all right, the next part of the introduction, and then we're going to start talking about books that brought us here, is how we first found all these fine folks. So we actually met on the Great Pizza Crusades, where we try to eradicate the world of pineapple going on pizza. It's monstrous. We shouldn't allow it. Sadly, we have not won the war yet, but it's not over. We're still fighting. And now let the angry memes come at me. All right. So Declan, since we're here to talk about Upstream Reviews, and you started the website, you want to tell us what made you do that and start, putting together the team that is Upstream Reviews now?
Oh, under the heading of things that happen when I get pissed off enough, I initially I decided, okay, there is no basically independent reviewer website that I found. I went to a whole bunch of places, mostly specializing in a certain kind of lean media. And they keep talking about, politics is downstream from culture. And it's like, dude, if you believe that, how about you look at other media sources? How about you look at other books? Oh, well, so-and-so doesn't write anything good in art or literature. It's like, come in. And so I went around going, okay, hi. A, you're wrong. B, I'll be happy to review these books for you because you're obviously too stupid to actually find these books on your own. I didn't say that. I'm not suicidal. After a while and getting blown off for the most part, especially loved all the people who went, oh, we don't review fiction. It's all trash. It's like, well, so's your freaking magazine. Anyway, and, I made loud, angry noises about it on Twitter because that's what you do. And Rob Crucy, something like that, came to me and said, okay, you know what? I was actually kind of thinking of putting together a website like this. How'd you like to join? And, we basically put it together. We put together a format. We put together, I put together a format for a simple reason that I was already doing book reviews on my own website, and I wanted to make certain that I wasn't being a lazy bugger and just copying and pasting. So, we wound up with a format. And we went from WordPress to Substack because, yes, go to WordPress and they don't protect you from malware. And, so now we're on Substack. We're trying to get everybody paid because writing for free is a pain. And we're off to the races. We've got about a dozen reviewers. Not everybody drops in because everybody's got a life, but we have enough people kicking around that we are now doing it all year round, at least in 2024. We'll see if we can do it in 2025.
I mean, I still got like 40 that I haven't converted from my own website that I have to put into format that's for yours. So, I mean, that's a couple of weeks right there.
It is.
So, all right. So that's how we came to. So, Declan, how did you find the people that write for you, or did they find you?
Yes. Now there are some people Rob Kersey knew. I don't remember if I invited Chris. But I basically pinged a bunch of people. Rob pinged a bunch of people, and we now have the Magnificent 12, soon to grow. I forget how we got you on board. I think I was just talking about it one day, and you said, "Hey, I write book reviews. Come on board."
So we were talking about something because you and I chat about nonsense from politics to history to whatever, because nobody else wants to hear our history talks. They get bored. So we kind of do that on the DMs a lot. And that's when you mentioned, because I told you I'd stopped doing reviews on my website just because I didn't have just wasn't getting enough eyeballs to make it worth it. And you're like, well, we've got this thing over here. And so I've been writing for you. Although lately I've been trying to focus on new books that I haven't already reviewed and read, so I can just start it in the right format instead of converting it. What about you, Denton? How did you find?
Declan reached out to me, asked me if I wanted to review, but the problem is I have a very bad streak of the JE, because I won't say his name without him being here, attitude towards books. If I like a book, I have a really hard time, doing a full review of it because I can't find things to comment on it. I just kind of like it. The ones I tend to, the few times I do review are ones that I can't stand. And I tend to be a bit better at quantifying that is like transparent aluminum. We'll go back to that again. That bothers me. So anyway, I got invited. I never really did that, but I started reading it. I'm one of your paid subscribers, and I've gotten quite a few books, some of which I would have probably never even looked at if I hadn't seen the review. Lee Beckett, for example, Carolyn did 2 reviews of 2 of her books, Queen of the Martian Catacombs, I think, and The Black Amazon of Marsh. And they're wonderful pulp, sci-fi fantasy. You might be able to call them sci-fi if your definitions are wide enough. But they're just wonderful little books. And I had never heard of them before, and they were a great read. The Titan Madge, latest one of LaPointe's Gun Madge. I saw that because
Gun Magus, yes.
Yeah, of the review. So I've just found a lot of stuff that's fun to read. I'm not particularly into grim dark. As I've said more times than you guys probably want to hear, I'm not particularly into science fiction. Even in my own writing, I like my heroes to be heroic, my women to be beautiful, and my bad guys to be, so evil that you can smell the stench of hell when they walk in the room. And there's a lot of that there. A lot of the books, the reviews are good. They tell you, really what you need to know. My impression is they tend to be pretty fair. They don't tend to be the way I'd probably write them, where they wouldn't be. They'd probably be way too positive. These 2 and some of the other people there are costing me a fair bit of pocket change. As I, go into the library and they tell me, we've never heard of that writer. What's this book you want? And I have to end up going to Amazon and giving them more of my hard-earned money. So.
Well, Carolyn is doing a feature on how to harass your local library into getting these books. So, might be of help.
Yeah. And a lot of that with the library, at least as I understand it, is it can't be Amazon's print on demand because the quality doesn't meet the needs. Because the library bases a book on it has to be able to be checked out and not fall apart with X number of times. Mm-hmm. That's how they determine value, and Amazon doesn't meet those standards. But if the independent author goes through like Ingram Sparks, For the print, you can generally get the library to order it.
Right.
So I only know that because I went
That would be
through.
another good one because I'd love to know how to be able to go through Ingham Sparks. I haven't been able to figure that out on my own yet.
I haven't done it on my own. I just know because the library gave me a pretty long. The local librarian gave me a pretty long lecture because I was looking for books that I wanted to be able to check out that weren't, and they're like, no, this is what they need to do. You can email the author and tell them to do this, and we'll be able to order it. So, and there were some technical requirements that Amazon doesn't meet as well. I guess something about the SKUs on the back. They're not ISBN numbers. They don't recognize the ASBN Amazon number, which is also part of the problem. And again, that could be specific to each local library as well. But I imagine the quality is going to be a large factor. The quality of the actual printed material, not the contents, but the actual paper that it's wrapped in and all of that. So, how did you find them, Chris? How did you find Upstream?
Actually, Declan did invite me, and it's because I started taking my Amazon reviews, in which I put time into those, and I started throwing them on my old Twitter account and tagging the authors in them, and I think he just liked what he saw. So most of the ones that are sourcing the reviews that I'm doing now are like, because it's like I'd rather take like those quick, the Amazon reviews that you do and actually do something better with it. And in the format that Upstream has is a great place to do that. It's like to actually go in depth. You see my reviews. I mean, I don't do a lot, but they tend to be pretty thorough. I mean, I admit I make them a little academic-y. I can't escape my training in that. I'm a historian. But it's actually a good place. And because I think I expose a lot of the some of the really obscure ones, or ones that have been out of view for a while, and try to get those back in front of the public.
So one of the things to give you as an example of when Declan wants only positive book reviews, because he's, we've all kind of had that conversation. The world's negative enough. A little bit of brightness. I wrote a review for Team Yankee. I read the Team Yankee is the book by Harold Coyle. I read that when it first came out. Absolutely loved it. Was going to read it again just to kind of see, like, as taste changed and the writing styles evolved, how it held up. And my review ended up being a critique, not because the content wasn't good, because whatever intern had taken this original print copy and tried to make a digital copy, like they skipped whole chapters. Some chapters were like doubled. It was just poorly done ebook, not the quality. And even just mentioning that, Deck was like, yeah, that's too negative. We're not going to air that one.
Yeah.
So, and that's not a bad thing. Like,
yeah. Part of the problem with negative reviews is if you want negative reviews, pick a YouTube channel, any YouTube channel. Yeah. There are, I swear, half of YouTube runs on engagement farming by people giving negative reviews, trying to piss people off, and congratulations. You have now put more eyeballs on crap than you have on good material. Hell, internet reviewers created a guy named, what the hell is his name? Tommy Wiseau, because he did a movie called The Room. It was so terrible, every YouTube movie reviewer had to go and review it, and now it's a cult classic. It's like, congratulations, you couldn't have reviewed something good. So,
I don't rage watch. I don't rage read. I wouldn't put the time and effort into the reviews that I do if I hated the material, because quite frankly, life's too short. I'm turning 47 here soon. I don't have enough days in front of me to read bad books.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, if you get to the end of the first chapter or two and the thing's absolutely terrible, you could force yourself to finish it. I've done that. I did it when I was in school. I've done it for a couple of friends. Again, the guilty will remain nameless. Lynn Smile, as he probably knows who.
I do.
But it's kind of like, why bother? I mean, there are so many good authors out there, and you trip over them. And I don't read a lot of romance. I read a romance the other day because my wife left it out. I mean, it was just a wonderful little book. And it was like, I could have read this, or I could have forced myself to read science fiction by somebody who believes in transparent aluminum. This is a real issue with me. I'm sorry.
it's a rising tide kind of lifts all boats kind of attitude towards, because it's just like the reason why Declan put the site together to begin with. if nobody's taken the time to do serious, legit reviews out there, this type of criticism serves a genuine purpose. If nobody takes the time to do it, folks are going to toil away in obscurity rather than getting a chance to maybe do what they love. Get beyond the paid hobby stage.
The other thing that this does is, because you see a lot of snobbery in some of the other review sites that are out there. Oh, it's individual published, we won't review it. And I'm like, okay, like TradPub gave you 50 Shades, and I'm sorry, like, love it or hate the content. Like, I tried to read it, the prose were just bad. Like, I didn't even, like, I'm not prudish about the content. I'm just like, I couldn't get past the actual writing style. And that was traditionally published and went through several editors. So, I mean, you can't tell me that somehow, like, the gatekeepers of TradPub in tone quality, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's no implied quality just because it went through some of the big five. And so the fact that you'll review any book, regardless of who publishes it, I mean, like, you do Baen books, you do indie books, you've done Tor books, like, it doesn't really matter. It's the books that matter, not who made them.
Yeah. Have any of you guys read Beware of Chicken?
No.
It is a cultivation novel. Basically, a guy develops, chi powers in that. It is absolutely fantastic. It's hilarious. He makes fun of all the tropes, but he does it very good-heartedly. It's Beware of Chicken because the guy's chicken becomes enlightened and turns into an extremely badass chick.
Okay, I see. Now that's funny. That's something I'd actually like to read just for the heck of it.
And he started on Royal Road. He ended up having like 1 million readers before he did the book. And it's kind of like, at that point, why does he need a trad publisher?
Bingo.
But the books are hilarious, and I don't know who reads them for him, but I have the audio books. And man, they're hilarious. The voices are just what I would have imagined, And I mean, with the exception of reading Ben Chia's work, I don't really read cultivation novels. This thing's hilarious. I mean, it is just, if you've done martial arts at all, you have heard the hints of most of these tropes. And, it's just, but, I can't imagine a trad publisher touching this.
Well, that's what sort of the great thing is because I think a lot of the books that we review, and a lot of the ones I go after, are ones that I'm like, TradPub wouldn't be caught dead publishing some of it. Fenton Wood, for example, is an author that I reviewed, and you saw that monster review I did. And the reason is the book deserved it,
and I read it.
You know what I mean? And that was and I'm sitting there reading through this going, dude, nobody in their right mind that I could think of really in the big five would go anywhere near this.
Well, see, that's the thing is the overhead for the Trad 5 is so TradPub books is so high because they've got all the support staff and whatnot. Whereas indie, your return on investment's a lot lower, so you can go with some of the niche markets that are just fun that TradPub couldn't afford to do. So, like Amish romance is dying in TradPub. Indie authors are still making good money at it. Why people want to read Amish romance, I don't know, but it's a thing. And indie can do it because, again, your overhead is high. You're paying about 2 cents a word for an editor. We'll say $1,000 for a book cover, and that's on the high end for most people. And you've got 3,000 books is all you got to do to break even, and that's not as hard as you would think.
Yeah, and the other thing is, too, a lot of the, let's face it, I mean, I publish traditionally, technically, under my real name. No, I'm not really named Denton Saul. If you have any French at all, it makes sense, and you know why. But the thing is, they're not that good. I mean, my technical book sells for almost $200. It's very specialized, and I pick up the 3rd edition now, and I can probably leaf through any chapter and find you three typos that the high dollar copy editors and that missed. And we're not talking something like a word like modulus. We're talking a word like goes. I mean, we're not talking technical stuff, and I don't imagine. From some of the other books I read, if I really went over them critically, it would be any better. I mean, it's just you're not getting your money's worth. What a lot of it's going to is for the 4 martini lunches.
And so you do the quick math real quick, because a $4.99 book on Amazon nets the publisher about $4.10. So $3,000 overhead, which is reasonable, I think, for most indie. You need 733 sales roughly to break even, and so you can service smaller markets than you normally would, and I think that's a good thing because for years you would have heard, well, Mill Sci-Fi doesn't sell well enough for trad pub, that's why there wasn't a lot that did it, and then Bain made a killing at it because their overhead was lower because they're not in New York City.
Yeah, because hey,
yeah, I think your numbers are a little. I think your earning numbers a little high there, but yeah, I mean it's definitely doable, and a heck of a lot of people, you can get your covers relatively cheaply if they're not too complex. If you know people, or if you marry people, like somebody on this call did. I think that's a bit excessive to get your own cover designer, but whatever works for him. So
if you have to marry all your minions, though, that can get you in trouble.
There's a lot of ways you can cut corners and get a book out fairly cheaply. And the other thing is you don't have to worry about somebody. And I did not quite realize who this woman who edited it was involved with and all that stuff. But you don't have to worry about somebody trying to get you to relight large scenes of it because, well, that won't sell in Catholic bookstores. It's like, but Miss Editor, I'm not Catholic. Clint's shaking his head over there because he's heard this story without the filters. But I mean, that's the problem is you deal with the editor, and it's like, well, I don't like that character. Can you, in like the thing? Can you make them? Can you make them? Blue-haired and transvestite, and it's like, no, I don't think it'll work.
So, in addition to doing book reviews, you've recently started doing, I guess since I write for Upstream too, started doing like Chris has been doing some music reviews of some of the classics. So, what do you what are you doing with the music reviews, Chris?
That I wanted to do as kind of a one-off and see if it would take, because before I was a writer, I played in bands. I was a musician first before I wrote, and I just kind of missed doing that. When I was in a younger man, I used to earlier on the internet and blogs and stuff. I reviewed music, so I figured I'd give it a shot again and see if, especially if the music was adjacent to the different types of book audiences we write for, and see if people would dig it. And it was a slow start. That thing sat there for a few days, and that interest started doing this. So I'm like, okay. I got a few more I'm lining up. I'm going to do a few more. One of them is going to be for Blind Guardian's Night in Middle Earth, right? Because that's got to be the one of the most fantasy-adjacent metal records of all time, and I finally got around to listening to it. So I'm going to do a few things like that are.
Chris, which one did you do already? I hadn't noticed this one.
Oh, it was a Black Sabbath box set that just came out.
Oh, okay. I'll have to go look.
Yeah, and there was a follow-up one too. So I mean, I tell you what, if people dig it, then why not add to it? Because a lot of that stuff is intermingled. I mean, part of the reason why reviewing Sabbath was fun is because a lot of their songs deal with fantasy and mythological themes or religious themes and all that kind of stuff, and it's adjacent to the work we're already doing. That and a lot of my favorite authors always have a playlist, or a lot of times either on their websites or in their book. John Ringo does that. Nick Cole, I mean, it's spot the reference with his work, honestly. And kind of going back to what Denton said, one of the reasons why the lights came on for Trad Pub for me was Nick's story about getting Control Revolt published, which is a great book, and we've reviewed it, I think, and if not, I'll hit it up because I've read it and give it another go. But I just think it's fun. I like doing music reviews, and honestly, I can build those a little quicker sometimes than some of the movies or books. So I've got about 4 or 5 records I want to do, and I just think it's going to be fun.
Sam Robb is doing that analogy tied to Toll songs. I don't know if any of you have seen the first book has just come out. I think the second one's coming. I've got a little piece in that, and that might be one that'd be fun to see. Not only the book review, but the review of some of the music, because all of the stories in it are supposed to tie to a specific Toll song.
That'd be neat. I mean, I know a couple of years ago, Kevin J. Anderson did some for Rush, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is we could tag team the reviews, so to speak. Somebody reviews the record, somebody reviews the book, or it's collaborative, because, that'd be a really neat project. Might take a bit to do it, but, I think it'd be really cool. And I can't recall anybody else trying something like that yet. I haven't seen it at least. So,
And
hey,
so
it's a little
I haven't
for
I
nobody.
haven't seen that either. One of the other things that we've been doing through Blasters and Blades is all of our retro movie reviews. We copy like, hey, check this review out, and then we link all the places, and Declan uploads those for us, because that's the other cool thing is you don't realize like how much of what we consider pop culture now is standing on the shoulders of what came before us, but we don't always know where those bricks are because they kind of become buried in the sand, so to speak. So it's kind of fun playing archaeologist, so to speak, and digging those up. And like, I had never seen Forbidden Planet until we did this movie review. And I'm like, I can see all the things that were inspired by this because it was amazing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's like there's a blog on the N Index, which was all the early books used in the original D&D, and
Yeah.
and I mean, yeah, talk about a reading list for most people. I mean, I was surprised at how much of it I read, being older than dirt, and I was also surprised when I showed it to my sons that how much of it they hadn't even known about. I mean, things like, Lord Dunsay or Paul Anderson's The Broken Sword, just if totally foreign out of it. And I think The Broken Sword is one of the best fantasy, historic, whatever you call that weird mix of genders, still to this day, that's one of the best done pieces. I mean, Paul Anderson was a strange man, but man, he could write. I knew him. I met him through years ago.
Okay. So since we mainly focus on books, so what does everyone look for in a book that they like? Is there any one thing that they kind of glam onto when they're picking what to read?
Not particularly. It's just, oh look, this description jumped out at me, and we do have submissions. So I'll go through those. It's like, okay, yeah, this sounds like fun, and I'll pick them. I've read Denton's books with his, we're going to adapt Russian mythology into actual full fantasy novels, which they're fun. They're supposed to, I think you labeled them as YA, but they're too good for children.
I was told I had to because my protagonist starts off at 13.
Trad pub rules, but
Yeah.
I forget how I wound up tripping over El Jaji Lamplighter's Rachel Griffin novels.
Oh, those are wonderful. And I think I tripped over them because of you.
Okay, I'll take credit. I'll take the blame. In fact, I think I may have just been delivering the Dragon Award for her husband to the house. It's like, here, have some books. It's like, all right. And yeah, it's, wow, this is actually somebody who's well read. Who knew? That sort of thing. And good God, it's like, wow, this is like if Harry Potter was competently written. So there is a joke going around the internet of, for the love of God, read another book. If it's not Harry Potter, where it's like, yes, they only read Harry Potter. They've only read The Handmaid's Tale. And let's just say that to get all of the fun out of Jaji's books, it helps if you've actually read more than one bloody book.
I know
it's very much like her husband's. I mean, I think John Wright is one of the what's the term? I mean, he's not very well known, but my God, he should be. I mean, I still am in a bit of awe over the Iron Chamber of Memory. I mean, yeah. I just kind of,
Yeah, that's on my to review list. Honestly, I mean, I was so glad that I got to do the Book of Feasts and Seasons recently. That is one of my favorite books, and
that didn't hit me as hard. But man, if you're gonna do the Iron Chamber, you're a better man than I am.
I want to.
I don't have the guts.
I'd like to hit up a few more of his. I actually like the time travel one he did. He does about the only time travel stories I can stomach.
And his Neverwhere, or Never, whatever the first
Never Wither.
Never Wither. I mean, man, both my boys read very, very different stuff, and all three of us were like, "Ooh, that was a great story."
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. Is like the way I pick them so far is one, I'm digging through my to be read pile, and if I want to just I've got to get productivity up. It's okay. What's something I have reviewed before on Amazon that I can blow out into a much better, much more thorough, systematic? Because I love the format that Declan gives us to work off of. It's excellent, and it keeps you on track. So it's either digging through my to be read file, or I try to complement what everybody else is doing. Like if it's focused on super contemporary stuff, let me find something older, and put that in there. And that was actually why I even did the George MacDonald books. And like I said on some of those reviews, my kids drive soon to be kids, plural, drive my reading habits right now. So it's like, what do I want them to grow up with and read? And that helps select a lot of them. Like I said, George MacDonald or, Tolkien. I am going to sit down and do a review of Tolkien's Letters from Father Christmas, which that's just such a hard review to write because it's not really fiction.
Somebody should do Redwall one day. I always thought as a kid's book that was horribly underrated. You got to love something where the good guy is a badger.
I'll
give my
tell Vanessa to start reviewing it. She liked it.
So
write a review.
I know a lot of my reviews, I find authors that I like, I subscribe to their newsletter. If you have an author you like, subscribe to the newsletter. You'll know what's coming out when. A lot of times they'll sometimes have sales and they'll tell you about it there. But then when you get to the end, a lot of times they'll recommend what they're reading or, contemporary authors to them in the same genre. So, follow that rabbit trail and eventually you find all kinds of crazy, weird, obscure things hidden in the dark corners of Amazon or Barnes & Noble. So that's kind of how I find it. And then if I'm just browsing, I kind of let the cover speak to me. I'll like type in random word that I'm interested in, like, I don't know, sword or plasma gun or whatever. And then it just randomly populates stuff I might not have ever found. And I kind of let the algorithm do the work for me. But I don't just use the Amazon. I'll use Google or Barnes & Noble, although I really wish Barnes & Noble would update their website. It's like the 90s called and they want their website back. Holy crap.
Yep. Hey, even when Barnes & Noble's website went live, the number of times I would find out something on Amazon, you just copy the ISBN number, go over to Barnes & Noble, and oh, look, I can find it easier that way.
That's actually, I use Amazon's algorithm even when I don't buy them from Amazon. Just because it's good AI software that's predictive and, kind of figures out patterns of what you like. And if people like this, they might also like, so I use that. Although I found some smaller sites that do the no DRSM, the digital rights management stuff.
DRM.
It's like Bookapy has a bunch of really good books and they're pretty censorship resistant. Obviously everybody's required to censor as the credit card companies require. But I mean, you just can't really get around that at the moment. But so that's what I look for. Why do you think the reviews are important? I mean, obviously Denton said that's how he found some books. But for you, Chris and Declan.
The reviews are important. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I'll make this real short because, I think you haven't given you enough time with some of these. I think it's important because the art's important. And I actually think it's important for people to take this type of literature seriously. Yes, I use the L word. I think it's actually important to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think that's the best counter argument to people who think it's not serious literature or art or anything like that. Well, art cuts across a lot of different levels, high, middle, low. And there's nothing wrong with middle. Most culture comes from middle brow, you know what I mean? And that's an important and a good thing. And a lot of the stuff that is written in genre, guess what? It transcends boundaries a lot of times. I think it's important to treat it seriously.
I always find it amusing, Chris, that so much of what we now consider culture, Shakespeare, the paintings from the Renaissance and these things were all commercial art. I mean, these were all midbrow. These were actually, in Shakespeare's case, they were lowbrow. Some of those. I mean, they this high fancy, art, has always been basically crap. Let's be honest. It's like modern art. I mean, modern art is what people who can't manage to get into trade school do.
Yeah,
I have opinions on everything, and they're all a little weird. Just kind of.
It's okay. So, what about you, Declan? So, why do you think the book reviews are important for you?
Because, like Denton pointed out, some of these people should be better known. I have read Julie Pascal, who has done basically Dante, only with more explosions, and I mean way more explosions and rocket launchers. You have N.R. Lapointe, who is doing off the walls, totally gonzo, pulp fantasy, but it's thoughtful. It comes at things from a different angle every single time. He's got Chalk with, she's a Catholic schoolgirl where her chalk beings will come to life, where she's literally hunted by the dogs of war in the first few chapters. And
she gets a chainsaw.
And she gets a chainsaw and a golem, sorry. I have to pronounce the vowels very carefully. And, it is literally a rabbit hole that goes straight down to hell. And it's absolutely fun. And there are people where it's like, oh, well, who are these folks? Like, some of these people are best-selling authors. John C. Wright should be a best-selling author. Hell, he should be a grandmaster of science fiction, right up there with Gene Wolfe, followed, somewhere down the line, it's like Kevin J. Anderson and Timothy Zahn, but they're never going to get it because their books sell. It's kind of like how they're never going to get a Hugo Award. They sell books. And yes, that's a quote from Kevin J. Anderson. That's not me being snarky for once. But these people need, these are good books. They need more eyeballs on them. And I don't care how many we pull out. How many eyeballs we put on the reviews. It's just, these people need to be at least, have more exposure. And I know it's like, it's kind of like the joke from Oregon Trail. You have died from exposure. But, the difference between the big difference between trad pub and indie is trad pub, it can be shoved in your face at brick and mortar stores or on the front page of Amazon. And good luck if you're an indie publisher or published with any of that. And this is my way of just trying to get more eyeballs on them. And that's one of the reasons we've got multiple reviewers. It's like, hi, we've got 12 people sharing all these reviews. And hopefully, if they all have 5 people who follow them on Twitter, and it just grows geometrically.
Wow, 5
man. The cool thing is, because you've got so many, like, I don't want to say, I know the word diverse gets used over time, but I have unique individuals. You got 12 unique individuals with 12 unique sets of taste. And so everything, like when you look at a review, it's kind of almost like schizophrenic as far as like the topics and the books and all that. But that's, I think, what makes the site beautiful, because you get things I would have never looked at. I'm like, okay, I'll go buy that book. It looks interesting. Now, whether I have time to actually read is another story. I buy more books than I read. It's a problem. I know. I need to get help.
I wouldn't know what that problem looks like.
So I actually started writing reviews when I was doing it just for my website, because I said, well, if I'm writing in this genre, let me review people that are more famous than I am, so I can tweak the algorithms to say, oh, if you search this name, sometimes J.R. Handley comes up. So it was very mercenary in the beginning. And then I realized, as I was reading it, I was doing 2 things. I was teaching myself what I liked and why, because you're thinking about it when you're doing reviews. If you're writing a review that anybody wants to read, if it's not just, they're pretty pictures, right? Like if you get thoughtful with it, you end up exploring what you like, why you like it. And then for some of us, because my TBI had memory issues, my reviews actually helped me go back later so I can remember what character is what. I'll just skim the review. And that helps me for later rather than having to keep starting back at the beginning of every series, because then I'd never get anywhere. So it's a kind of twofold. It's a good way to learn about a genre too. If you start trying to break down like I guess that's a little bit of that literature Chris was cussing at us about.
Hey, I like people who try to push the envelope a little bit out there too. And in the indie spaces, they've got more freedom of action to do that because, it's they're not afraid to fail. They're not afraid to fail because of the economics of it, and they're not afraid to. I'll steal a stupid buzzwordy term. Fail forward. You know what I mean? Trad pub's almost at a point where can't afford to do that anymore. It's kind of like even major record labels. I mean, how are they doing lately? I mean, so if you think about it that way, I mean,
I know an awful lot of young folks who won't go near it's all. Gosh, there are a couple of channels out there that are all brand new, small bands, that kind of stuff. And I know both of my boys and most of their friends do not go towards the major labels. They get all of their music off of these things because it's fresh, it's different, it's not the same stuff. Where you have to. It's like pop. It's like bad pop music, right? What gets published is what's going to sell. And I think that's the same thing with a lot of books. Is what gets published is a lot. So there are very few publishers that are going to do something like the Thursday Next novels, which are incredibly bizarre if you've never read them. But I mean, that, and he, and God bless him. I don't know how the heck he managed to get that published traditionally, but I mean, most of that stuff that's that creative and that different, you're only going to see with an indie. You might see it with a small, maybe Bane, because they're a little weird. I mean, after all, they publish Monster Hunters, and that's pretty far out there. I've noticed they've also picked up Simon Green, which surprised me. He's pretty strange.
Hey, you know what? I mean, I was just thinking about it. It's the speaking of the whole, like, again, this goes back to why I think we review music too now, and why it's only a good thing for us, and even to pull the movies in. How we're doing that is we're a zine, we're like it's like punk rock, and we're a zine. We are covering the indie scene here, and it's a lot of your magazines started out that way. A lot of your big ones, I mean, they're no longer in that league, and frankly, they're no longer as interesting to read either because of that. I mean, I look at it this way. I mean, if we end up being the indie pub version of Rick Beato, I'd sure as heck be happy to have his numbers.
Yeah. And like I said, because, largely we do indie, although like I said, there's no, like Declan has never said, you can't review this book. If we like the book, he lets us review it with the appropriate content warning. So, I mean, our reviews are all over the place, which means, you don't have to worry about it as much, but it also means you're a place where people that don't fit the mold, either with independent presses or some of the small presses that review sites won't recognize because they didn't pay the market rate. Instead, they did a royalty split. Suddenly that's not professional. They won't touch it. I've run into that with anthology reviews.
Yeah, we know him.
And so I like that it gets exposure to ones that are, on the cutting edge, so to speak, of different ideas. I mean, it was an indie author I found that started doing you can hyperlink things in an Amazon on an ebook on your Kindle. And he would hyperlink the title chapter. And when you click it, it would go to schematics that he had professionally made of the parts of his ship. It was the backyard spaceship. And you would click it and you could see the map of the spaceship, and it would change because it was like quantum. You put quantum in front of physics and you could do whatever you want in sci-fi. It's like magic. And so quantum physics would allow him to kind of move the ship around, and it was bigger on the inside and all that stuff. But you could track it because he would show you the pictures if you click the link. I mean, obviously, if you're reading it without Wi-Fi, you can't do that. But like that's the kind of stuff you never think about.
And JR just hit one of the reasons why I don't read science fiction.
Although, if you want to check the cutting edge of anything on the writing market, it's actually all the romance authors. They're doing everything first because it's such a large market.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know some people from some marketing classes that I was forced to take at one time, and one of them is a romance author, and she talks about her monthly sales numbers, and I, who am happy when I sell one book a month, sob silently in the corner as she talks about, it wasn't a great month. I only moved 20,000 books. It's like
So the other thing I like about Upstream is because like some of the people that do reviews on Amazon, I don't think they realize what they're doing. Amazon sends them the email, pesters them to do it, and you get nonsense like there's just a bunch of words. I'm still typing here because they won't shut up if I don't. And you get other ones like it's literally a fantasy romance novel because this is a friend of mine who's an author. This happened to her, set on another not Earth, and she's just using kind of fantasy tropes to write her fantasy novel, romance novel. And people are critiquing her because that's not what happened in history. I'm like, what part of fantasy did you not understand? And so, you know, these kinds of reviews can highlight and kind of hopefully outweigh the nonsense, you know?
Oh yeah, I don't. It's especially terrible if you watch anybody who does Regency. I mean, where people will have an absolute cow in a review because they buttoned a button. Because buttons, I think, were purely decorative back then. And
I don't know.
I remember seeing some review, and it's kind of like, you know, dude, it was one word in one line in what was a really good murder mystery. Why are you having a cow?
Well, that's actually a stupid review because, you know, as a history nerd, roughly 1900 BC, 1900 BC was the first known button use. It could be off by a couple hundred years, but I mean, it was definitely a long time ago. But that's why I got in trouble when I was an intern at Valley Forge. So sometimes my mouth, like I open it and I say what's on the tip of the tongue before I think. We had a guy try to critique the history and say that the house was not historically accurate because they used nails. And they didn't have those in the Revolution. So before I could stop myself, I'm like, so they glued Jesus to the cross? And he got really mad and he wrote his congressman. And so it's a whole thing. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm immortal because if you go to the Library of Congress.
Probably a whole lot of blacksmith's apprentice in colonial times who wanted to know what the hell they were spending their first year making if those things weren't nails.
Right. But
for your first year, you made nails.
And that's where the pennyweight comes from, because it's as many nails as you could buy for a penny. But it does mean I am immortal, because at the Library of Congress, his complaint letter about me is sitting there somewhere. So in 1,000 years, historians can dig that archive up and like, who's this J.R. Handley? He was a jerk. Okay, so we've talked about what we like. We've talked about Upstream. As we bring this to a close, because I can ramble for hours and people don't like that, we're going to give each of you a chance to weigh in. What is your personal favorite book and why do you love it?
By genre?
Sure.
Okay. Chris, how about you go first?
Okay, I'll make it easy and I'll make it pretty standard. No joke, The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings, and the reason is because every time I go back to it, I get something new out of it. Every time. And because of that, that's, to me, that's like, okay, that's the mark of a great work to me, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to that one. Right now, it would probably, in fantasy, it's Narnia, mainly because I've pretty much I have read that one most recently, mostly in audio form because I did a lot of driving, moving from New York. Anyway, in thrillers, there was, may he rest in peace, a guy named Joseph Garber, who wrote a novel called Vertical Run. It's one of the few books where I read it in 6 hours because it was summer and it's just, I'm going to read this. I've started this book at 9 o'clock at night and I'm going to finish it. It was that fun. Oh God, fantasy is just, where do you start? Because you've got Nate LaPointe and Chalk, which was awesome. He also did Gun Magus, which is probably more isekai, but was still entertaining. It's John Wick only in Final Fantasy VII, down to the airship and the why is the wizard a bunny kind of conversation. So many books. Not to mention, hell, the one John Ringo book I have read more than once, which was Princess of Wands, which was, let's just say he started doing something I had thought about a few years earlier, and it's like, gee, I can do this too. And then there's Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy, which is, again, one of the few books I have read twice. And I mean the whole trilogy. And, if you want for novel and literature, I have read Les Miserables when I was, between 8th grade and freshman year of high school. Awesome book. Granted, I had to skip over a lot of we're going to do a 200-page thesis on Waterloo now. It's like the last 6 pages of this entire section is actually relevant to the plot. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now.
Okay. What about you, Denton?
Probably Lord of the Rings for fantasy, though I'm mortally offended that Denton didn't mention Avatar Wizard, and I'll probably never let him forget that.
Yeah.
But probably in mystery, I'd say Tony Hillerman. I love the Tony Hillerman books. And surprisingly, his daughter is doing a fairly good job at continuing the series. In poetry, probably either The White Horse by Chesterton or Region of the Summer Stars by Williams, depending whether I'm figuring I want structured or unstructured verse. In science, The Phenomena of Polymer Fluids by Bird and DeHassett. And what else? I read anything. Trying to think. Terry Pratchett, in whatever you call that. I adored those books, particularly the later ones.
Discworld?
Discworld, but more so his children's series. Particularly I Shall Love Midnight. He's got 3 books about a young witch, and they're just absolutely lovely books. They're fabulous. All the humor of Discworld, but none of the bitterness that occasionally creeps in. And I'm trying to think of what else. I'm looking around here because there's so many things. I mentioned Redwall. I thought that was a great. I'm not sure what do you call what comes before young adult? Something for tween.
Middle grade?
Yeah, mid-grade. I mean, I thought the Redwall books were just incredibly well done. And then there's all the old stuff. I mean, it's like, how do you classify Stassoff, The Wizard in Rhyme, and the Associate Theories? I mean, they're just, there's some of these people, I read these things and I think, I'm going to go back to just writing science because ain't ever I'm going to write this good.
Hey, I've gone back to read Treasure Island with my kids already. For science fiction, I like the first Ender's Game book. I'm one of those who I get leery with series a lot of times. I'll like the first one and I might stop after that because I'm afraid of what it might turn into. Not a whole
Yeah, kind of like what happened to Dune.
Yeah, I mean the pulp series, you're going to get because of the pulp model, and that goes like Declan's Tommy Nolan series and all that. It's like, no, I know I can safely keep going, but Dune, I quit reading Dune after Dune Messiah, and I honestly wish I'd stopped after the first one.
Yeah, I stopped after the first one because everybody warned me about it.
Yeah, and it's like I haven't read Speaker for the Dead. I haven't read any of the follow-on books to Ender's Game, except I do want to read Ender's Shadow. That one I do want to read. I hear that one's actually a really great companion to it. But so from a sci-fi perspective, yeah, I think Ender's Game is up there. I mean, believe it or not, that was believe it or not, it was assigned as a class book at the Air Force Academy in our philosophy class. It was that my semester got Starship Troopers, so I ended up reading them both, and it was kind of like, yeah, guess what, the Starship, the philosophy class that we had where we read Starship Troopers was in part based on the class described in Starship Troopers. So that's like still the most meta thing I've ever experienced in my life. It still freaks me out a bit. But so, yeah, I mean, hey, for everybody out there who's listening now or who's going to watch it on YouTube, you hear all these names and titles we're dropping. You can rewind the film here. It's not like you got to take notes. I said film, I'm old, but yeah. But you could take notes, buy some of these things. Nate LaPointe, Declan's books, Denton's books, JR's books. You might find me in a few anthologies too, throw a bone. But like I can definitely endorse Chalk. My daughter loved that one, and freaked her out a little bit. But especially since we just read Simon and the Land of Chalk Drawings before that, so that really
Wow.
So for me, I guess if I'm going contemporary, which is kind of speculative fiction in a very broad sense, but Harold Coyle and Clive Cussler wrote a lot of really good stuff. With Clive Cussler, you do have to skim through some of the description of the diving equipment. He really liked talking about that. But other than that, like I love that he dove into the history. I also thought it was neat that if you read Clive Cussler, always put a self-insert, like a minor, like the butler or the bus driver or whatever is going to have his name.
Alfred Hitchcock,
yeah, which I thought was kind of cool. I liked if you're looking at indie books, I like the Galaxy's Edge books, what they did with retake on the Star Wars style books. They also do the Wargate books, which is Declan's writing some stuff for them with the basic premise is take modern military units and stick them in a fantasy setting. They're not the first one to do it, but they kind of take a unique take on solving the supply issue in these books. This is traditionally published. It's a little bit older, but the Green Rider books, I remember reading those as a kid.
Gosh, yes, I remember those.
If you like alternative history or time travel, depending on how you look at it, Harry Turtledove's Guns of the South is an amazing book. It doesn't get nearly the love it needs to. I know some of his other books, Turtledoves, get more credit. The Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkin, although I will admit, as much as I'm a libertarian, some of the later books, he gets a little too preachy for my taste. Like when I say I want no politics in my book, even when I agree with you, if it gets too preachy, I'm like, if we wanted to get preached at, we'd go to church, right?
Yeah. Terry Goodkind, just skim or skip the speeches, because there was one book that was particularly bad with that. And the first book is like, I don't know why this BDSM stuff is here. I'm just going to skip that. It's like, oh, look, once you skip all that, we've got a perfectly good book.
Another old one that, is really good is the whole Rising of the Dark series. I don't know if any of you have read that. It's a kid's book, but it is drawing on Cornwall and English folklore rather than Welsh. And it's they're good. They're very good.
Yeah. And
when somebody on this group told me I wrote like I was writing in the 60s and the 70s, I took that as a compliment.
Yeah. I mean, we're rereading the Prydain books right now. So, yeah, it's exactly along those lines.
Yeah, I don't see how that would be an insult.
I also like Terry. I think it's one of the Terrys, but Terry Brooks, I think, did the Shannara series, which is a whole bunch of. It's a universe, so it's got lots of mini series and standalone books. I really dug those. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I even like the TV adaptation of it. That is where I realized that this was a post-apoc setting and not a pure fantasy, because they show them in the movie walking through, and there's this remains of a battleship. I'm like, that wasn't in the book, so I went and reread it. And I'm like, holy crap! If you knew what you're looking for, it was right there the whole time. So I really dig those books. There was a lot of them. Back to indie, if you like space opera with it that understands the military, Terry Mixon's Empire of Bones books. Him and I have a fun time going back and forth on who the real main character is, because he doesn't agree with me. He wrote the books, but I'm the one that read them, so I get to decide. That's the way it is. And then he did his last Hunter books, which is a take on the with Jay and Cheney, which is a take on the idea of the museum turned battleship again, like an old ship that's retired and brought back. I really dig that. If you like just kind of out there topics that's kind of pulpy, Joe Vasicek writes a lot of good stuff. He wrote a series, I think it was called Outroller. I'd have to look. It's been a few years since I read it, and it was all serialized novellas at the time, because that's what they were doing. But I mean, his books literally kept me alive. When I first got back from Iraq, Survivor's Guilt's a bitch. And because they were serializing these novels, I'm like, well, I'm not going to kill myself today because I got to know what happens on this book. I'll wait. And then because it's serialized, there's always another book and another book. And before you knew it, therapy worked, and I didn't want to hurt myself anymore. And I even wrote the foreword when he started republishing these novellas into, what was like 9 or 10 novellas are now like 3 or 4 books, because markets change and you got to adapt. But he's a really amazing writer. He tries a lot of interesting topics. I found one of the things I like about him, he happens to be from the LDS Church, which means he did a mission overseas. I think when authors have seen more than just their own backyard, it helps. They don't have to do it because they're missionaries. They don't have to do it because of the military. But you get an appreciation that not everywhere thinks like we do in America. And I think it makes the writing richer for people who travel.
I had a lot of fun. I traveled extensively, not for the military, but for business. I mean, for like over almost 20 years, I was overseas for at least half the year visiting foreign countries. And man, I found that just so opened my eyes to just so many things. And some of it's made it into some of the short stories I've written. Particularly, one thing that always amazed me was just how, different British culture can be from the United States, and having to drag my VP out of a meeting to tell her that I'm sorry. I know that word is totally acceptable as a friendly insult in the United States, but if you say BSC one more time, somebody's going to cut you in the parking lot.
So it's the Star Wanderer series by Joe Vasicek, which is the one that literally saved my life. But he also has another good one. It's a fantasy short story, but it's very moving. It's called A Hill on Which to Die. And it kind of takes a look at what you're willing to fight for. I mean, it's fun fantasy, but it also kind of looks at, what it means to be a man and to stand, and what you're willing, like literally what hill you're willing to fight for and when to bend kind of thing. And I think those kinds of messages that are just wholesome, especially for young men out there, there's not enough of it. In an attempt to be more inclusive to everyone, we've been exclusive to some people, and it was really wholesome. It was moving enough that a short story I still remember, and I read it. It was written in 2015. I read it in 2015. A decade later, I still remember that story. So,
yeah, that's
and
awesome.
Joe Vasicek. So that's my list.
Hey.
If you have, go ahead.
I was going to say for everybody too is look for some of these titles to show up as future reviews if we haven't done them already, and we'll still take suggestions and recommendations. One that I'm looking forward to doing is for a book called Shagduke by J.B. Jackson that Peel and Press put out, and I got to tell you, that was one of the weirdest, coolest. I've never seen any contemporary writer nail the 1970s so perfectly as he did. I mean, that's one that I'll just throw out there as a recommendation. If you're just looking for something that kind of gets 1970s horror and supernatural type stories going, give that one a look, folks. I'll be doing a review on it fairly soon. Thank you.
One that I'm reading, if you want to talk about looking forward to, I've gotten the first one or two books are reviewed. The third one is with Declan, but like I said, we've got 12 people and they're packed, so it might be a while before it sees the light of day. But the War Master series, if you like game lit, this guy kind of wakes up in a fantasy world. It's written by Melissa McShane. The cool thing is, because she's a very devoutly religious woman, Melissa is, she won't write anything that she wouldn't let her preacher read, which means I can read it with my kid who's into games. So like we read it together. He wants the Dead Tree edition. I read the audiobook, but like we both can sit around the table and talk about a book, which is kind of cool. And then the same with Katie Cross's the Flight series. Flame is the name of the series. Flight is the second book, but we can read those together because it's got cool dragons, cool characters. And it doesn't have words that I have to, scenes I have to explain. Because that's one of the things I look at books now. Like if I'm listening to an audiobook while I'm driving a car, do I need to pause this one because the kid gets in the car? And it's nice to have ones that are good books, but also I don't have to hit pause when the kids are around.
Yeah, I remember going through that too, where you have to be real careful because they would read anything that I picked up. I mean, if I brought a paperback in the house, it was going to end up in one of their bedrooms under the covers with a lamp one night. They never wondered why their batteries never ran out.
Kids these days will never know that struggle with backlit like cell phones and Kindles. I remember sweating under the cover because I'm trying to hide that I'm reading, damn near burning myself with the flashlight because it would get hot, and thinking we tricked our parents. And they're like, "Jared, we knew the whole damn time. We didn't care. Read." And we thought we were getting one over on them. I was very disappointed as an adult to find out that was not the case. And these kids will never know the pain of holding the paperback with the flashlight, Anyway, all right. So, Declan, as we bring this puppy to a close, what are you writing at the moment? And then how can listeners and viewers find you?
well, I'm more editing than writing at the moment. Current book is On Tiber's Edge, a land and sea novel. Going to be coming from Wargate Press. I have no idea when. I'm still in the middle of editing it. And I'm currently, and should be at the time of this airing, running a Kickstarter for my vampire romance series called Honeymoon from Hell, where there's so many explosions. It's like, is there any place I didn't blow up? Not that I know of. I'm also working on multiple short stories for Raconteur Press because as of this recording, they just dumped 25 anthologies out there. It's like, I want to do that one. I want to do that one. I want to do that one. Just shoot me now. So I'm going to be busy for a while. And, you can find me on the Twitter and the Substacks and all that other stuff. Type in Declan Finn, author. There aren't many of us.
No, but it's definitely unique when you get it. All right, Chris, what are you writing at the moment, and then where can we find you? As usual, everything will be in the show notes.
Sure. I am working on some short stories for that master list of 25 and 25 from Raconteur. I'll actually be editing 2 of them. I'll be doing one called Weird War, which is basically supernatural or fantastical in a wartime setting. So the fantastical side of alt history as opposed to the counterfactual. And I'll be doing a sword and sorcery one later in 25 as well. Would like to see stories that lean more towards the Thundar, the barbarian side of sword and sorcery as opposed to more Conan stuff. But hey, send me what you got. So it'll be some short stories and starting to work on bits and pieces of some novels, including some long overdue projects as well. So it's time to start clearing the product backlog.
One of the things I realized with talking with William Joseph Roberts at Three Ravens Press, is some of the subgenres of fantasy people don't actually know because there's some of the older ones like sword and sorcery versus paranormal versus urban. Because that was one of his complaints when we were just joking around, is how many he got that didn't fit the genre. Like they're great stories, they're not sword and sorcery. And so I imagine you're going to run into that because if they didn't read some of the older stuff, they might be getting the genre wrong.
At least Raconteur has a policy of being genre fluid. So, I will say that when it comes to the releases, RTFA, read the F and assignment. And we'll also be doing some more Substack postings and maybe a few podcasts that talk about more in depth what we are looking for to help some of the writers, the newer writers especially, find some of those older sources. That's going to be a pretty deliberate effort. I can tell you that right there. Occasionally, I write a post over on the blog at Substack for them as the new intern, Steve. So you can get some tips there as well.
Well, you could also make a trip to Texas, and I can take you down to Cross Plains, and we can, burn a candle at the Robert Howard Shrine.
All right, and Chris, where can they find you online if they want to stalk you on the interwebs?
Let's see. Upstream, of course. Find the Substack there. Find the Raconteur Substack. Got a Twitter account that's a new one, a better one. Hopefully this time than my last attempt. Facebook page. It's a writer's page for both my wife and I. She writes as well under her own name, Jamie Denote, and under the pseudonym Lishka McCabe. Amazon.
All right, Denton, what are you writing at the moment, and then where can they find you?
Well, I just came out with book 6 in my Avatar Wizard, and I'm now working on book 7, which hopefully will close the series. Maybe. I'm not quite sure that's going to happen. Things happen. I swear my characters are alive. And then a while ago, I tried to do something. It was actually one of the first things I tried to write on the idea of Slavic myths having taken root in Texas, where the large Eastern German, Czech, and Slavic migrations happened back in the 1800s. And I have a world like that. I did a little book on it. It didn't work really well. So I've kind of redone it, and that should get done this year. And I'm calling it Werewolves, Blini, and Cold Fried Chicken.
That is a mouthful of a title, but I mean, I will take it.
So I got that, and then I've got a short story that I'm playing with, and I keep thinking that one of these days I'm going to write a romance because I think it would be fun. But I'm not sure that Miss Bokara out in West Texas has ever forgiven Paul Priet and I for doing the draft of the Love Truck, which was a redneck love song, and she was less than amused.
Okay. So
Anyway, that's it. The Avatar Wizard is probably, I'd really like to get that out because I got tired of, I have like 2 or 3 fans who actually call me up and yell at me. And you can find me under Denton Saul on Facebook, on MeWe, and on Twitter. I do not have a Substack. I probably should one of these days, nor do I have a patron. If you do find any one of those, they will also be polluted with woodwork, metalwork, some blacksmithing, some silver work, and other things like that, because I like to do things with my hands.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. You can use that to apply to when you're writing books, because you can make that the thing the character knows. So,
well, most of the smithing in the Avatar Wizard will work.
Okay.
I'm not sure about sticking your hand in a forge and being able to pull the power out of the fire, but the rest of it will work.
Don't try sticking your hand in the forge, please. People, don't do that. That doesn't end well. So I am still working on the Wargate series that when James had passed, that I was working on. Sadly, without him on speed dial, I got to do a lot more research on ancient religions than I would originally have picked for a project. But I think this one's going to pop. So I'm happy with what we're at. Like I said, I'm halfway through the second book. Going to keep pushing. I got the dragon. I rebought it so I could pick up speed. And let's see, as far as where you can find us at our link tree at linktr.ee /Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Facebook page and Facebook group. We have Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email for all the shenanigans. Send them to her. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people send the shenanigans to Stabby. She's here for it. We have our website, bunch of Spotify goobly-goots since they bought it. Unfortunately, they took away our nice, clean link. I got to figure out how to relink something. But if you go to the Blasters and Blades podcast website, you can find it. And for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help support the show. You can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment sections for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until they float away on a river of Java. And if you want to help support the show more directly, use the link in the show notes, code podcastgrunts. You get 10% off. It's not a drop shipping organization. They actually buy and roast their own beans. They ship it out from the US. So you're shopping local if you go through them, which we like. And we get a little bit of a kickback. You get a 10% discount. It's a win-win. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. I appreciate all of you coming on, and I'm definitely going to have to get you all back, because it's nice to have guests with opinions. It makes the episode flow fast. So we'll have to see if we can find a topic to shoot the crap with and go from there. But with that, I'm going to hit that end button, people. So have a nice